Oh, okay.
Hey, good evening. Sorry we're 15 minutes late. We had issues. But we're so happy to see you all. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Tiffany Dina Lofton. I'm the National Director for the Youth and College Division at the NAACP.
Happy birthday.
It is our founding Father's Day today, so happy birthday to the NAACP. 110 years.
Woo!
Don't say nothing? Okay, so we are going to do a quick round of introductions, and we're so excited that you all are here. Y'all remember that last week at this time, y'all's president, Donald Trump, gave his annual State of the Union address. And if you're like me, you probably didn't watch it because you just need to take care of yourself. But you did see what happened afterwards with the summaries of his speech. You can imagine he talked about the same things that he always talks about. The wall, ending HIV by the year 2030.
That was a wild card.
That was a wild card. We didn't think that was coming.
Yeah.
He also talked about a unison between the Democratic and the Republican Party. And some of you all know that he held the United States hostage by closing the government and shutting it down because he wanted to build his wall. In his speech, he talked about how he would not want to do that again, even though in a few days he probably will.
Yep.
And he also talked about things like NAFTA, which some of y'all don't know what it is, but we'll explain it later. And we said to ourselves, it is clear that not only did we assume correctly that your president, Donald Trump, would not talk about the issues that our communities cared about in terms of racial, economic, and social justice, but more importantly, it is also clear, and it's a deeper understanding for us, that because the president did not talk about issues that concern millennials, that we needed to set the tone and talk about issues that matter to us. Here's why we need to do that. Young people between the ages of 18 to 35 are now the largest demographic in this entire country. We are surpassing baby boomers, which is the largest generation known to man. We're passing them out. Keep having kids. And not only that, but we are also growing into the largest political electorate. And what that means is that if we all decided between the ages of 18 to 35 to vote at the same time, one day, at the same time, we can get whatever we want.
Yep.
Because we outnumber everybody else. If we all really wanted what we said we wanted, and we were all able to access fairly, and people didn't cheat in the elections, we'd be able to get what we want overnight. Because we have the numbers. So we felt like it was really important for us to have a conversation based off of what are the issues that are important to our communities, what are the issues that are important to people under the age of 35, hence these people on the panel. We are sending love right now because I know you're saying, well, wait, Tiffany, your flyer had more people on the panel. We want to send out love to Scotty Beam, who was unable to make it because of travel issues, and also we're praying and hoping the best for everybody in New York City who is frozen right now, and Jameer Burley unfortunately was unable to make it because of travel issues with the weather. But nonetheless, we're still going to have the conversation with you. So we're going to talk for a little bit. We want you all to engage with us. You're going to use the hashtag 2020Vision in order to get in contact with us. We have a TV screen behind the iPad that's recording us right now, and we want to make sure that we're answering all of your questions. And in addition to that, you can also text the word justice to the number 40649. Again, you can text the word justice, one word, to 40649. And without further ado, we're going to get started. We are currently, right now, in, I think, one of the sunniest places that are...
Absolutely.
One of the sunniest places.
Absolutely.
Even though me and Philip got crew necks on, it's pretty warm here. This is a cute sweater.
Well, I wanted you to see this.
I wanted you to see this sweater.
I designed it.
But it's warm here. We're in Miami, Florida, at the headquarters for Baller Alert. So shout out to Baller Alert. Thank you so much, Baller Alert, for hosting us. Y'all are so, this is great. I love it. We look beautiful. Oh, yellow shoes. Baller Alert, thank you so much for hosting us. This is at the intersections of culture, at the intersections of movement building,
yep,
and at the intersections of building real power.
Yep.
And Baller Alert, you created the space, you opened up your doors, you gave us the studio, you given us the equipment to be able to host this conversation.
Chicken.
And you gave us chicken, you gave us drink, and we're really excited to be able to host this conversation here at the headquarters of Baller Alert. So shout out to Baller Alert, the leadership, and the staff for just even having us. Yep, you can give me a round of applause. Clap on the, yep, I see y'all giving thumbs up and clapping on the live. That's great. So make sure you know how to spell. Appreciate you. So we're going to get started. Without further ado, I'm going to start from my left to my right. I want to first introduce the queen, Miss Blair Imani, who is here. Yes, honey. Yes, honey. Who is here to join us. I want to introduce my brother for, what, 10 years?
10 years.
10, maybe I'm making that up. 11,
sounded good. A decade.
10, a decade.
Over a decade.
Brother Philip Agnew, formerly Family, Umnisela, and then back to Philip Agnew. I had to do that.
Yep.
And then my new brother that we hung out today and went to the beach and got some really great food, Mr. Kendrick Sampson, who you all know from a bunch of different really dope things. Originally from Houston, Texas, and he decided to join us, and we're honored and glad that you're here. Thank you so much for being here. Your work is super important to this conversation. So we're gonna dive in. Again, ask us questions. We're gonna watch the live, type it into the comments, or use the hashtag 2020vision, or you can text the word justice to 40649. With that being said, we're gonna get this conversation popping because we have a lot to talk about. And if we're going to have this conversation, I need us to do two things. One, I need us to be always honest, and I need us to stand in our truths of our experiences. Because if we do not set the tone for what it is that we want this world to look like, all 59 candidates, I'm exaggerating, all 59 candidates that have come out to say that they're running for presidential positions in 2020.
On the Democrat
side. On the Democrat side.
Yeah.
Your president, Donald Trump, is attempting to get rid of the entire RNC to begin with because he wants to be the only person running for re-election. We also have gubernatorial races this year in Mississippi, in Louisiana, and in Kentucky. We also have district attorney races that are taking place. So there's elections all the time, always. We're not just voting on November 6th. We're voting all the time. And if we're going to have this conversation, we need to set the tone to tell them, if you want to win your election and you want to speak to millennials, here's how you're going to do it. So the first question that I have is, last Tuesday, did y'all watch President Trump's State of the Union?
Nah.
Hell no.
Why? Why are we gonna watch that clown stuff? You know, like, we already know what he was gonna say. It kind of came out of nowhere. I was off Twitter at the time, so I didn't really know that it was happening.
You was fasting for Twitter.
I was fasting for Twitter. You know, hashtag Islam. But like, it's really, I just, you know what he's gonna say is nothing new.
All right, so I watched clips of it.
Like afterwards.
Yeah, afterwards. I couldn't watch it live. And I'm going to just say, I think it's important that you do watch him. Because what he does, Donald Trump is masterful at talking to his people. You know what I'm saying? He's masterful at the dog whistle, at saying, he's very clear about what his base wants to hear. And they want to hear, are you going to build the wall? Are you going to make America great? Are we going to be number one? It's also, so it's important to hear what he's saying and what they want to hear. You know what I'm saying? It's also important because you want to see what the Democrats are going to do. Because I don't trust them motherfuckers either. And so all the I love that they wore white. I think it was a beautiful gesture. But I saw a meme that went around this week that I really loved. It was the meme of Mike Pence clapping for Donald Trump and then Nancy Pelosi with her thing. And I think that was a perfect synopsis of the world that we're in right now, where we celebrate Nancy Pelosi for doing little to nothing.
Bare minimum.
Right. Mike Pence is just doing what he always does, pandering to a president who does nothing for the people. But that last week, watching it and watching the clips, it showed me very, very clearly what the next 2 years are going to look like and what he's going to talk about for the next 2 years. And for that only reason, I thought it was important to look at.
And how Congress is going to respond to it, apparently.
Exactly, right. With a lot of gestures.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. I got a question for you later. Go ahead.
Okay.
I didn't watch it. I didn't think there was going to be any nuance that I was going to get out of it. I was watching it. I knew I wasn't going to be able to escape the news later. I knew I was going to get the summary of what's happening. I knew I was going to see clips. I didn't see it. It's not my president. It's definitely not my State of the Union. It's not, the State of the Union of anybody that I know. So I just didn't feel like I wanted to waste my time, and I still wanted to get some stuff done with, liberating immigrants and, of color and people of color, and, had work to do, and, I didn't want to waste my time on that. And just a note about Nancy Pelosi, it's not just like the bare minimum. She also said bullshit like all lives matter at the end of last year. She also has not stood with Ilhan Omar, who is being attacked, and there's just so much that I don't want to go on and on about Nancy Pelosi.
Go on and on. We got time.
Both of these,
what's important to you, Kendrick?
But both of the parties are doing some, for lack of better terms, fuck shit. So I think that, we have to hold them both accountable, and I'm more so worried about, making sure that I wanted to see what Stacey Abrams was going to say. I wanted to say.
You did watch that?
Yes, I did watch that. I wanted to see what the Democratic Party's response was because, you know, it's really going to be up to them and, you know, those people who say that they care about the most vulnerable in this country to vote the right way and for the Democratic Party to get behind the right candidate and have a fair election in order to not give us another 4 years of this bullshit. So that's what I was more worried about.
While we're piling in on Nancy Pelosi, can I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, just for those that don't know, Nancy Pelosi is the most powerful Democrat right now, supposedly the most powerful Democrat in Washington right now. She also came out after Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
That's her.
Came out and won and was leading a left-wing insurgency of the party, right? She came out and said, oh, that's nothing. And while that's important is Nancy Pelosi is responsible for making sure that Democrats stay at the center, that they do not move too far left, which is where no matter what you think, if you list the things that you want to see in the world, you will be left. Right, I'm willing to guess it would be left. And so she came out and said, this is nothing, we're going to hold back on this. And what we've seen is people come out and say, no, the party needs to move left. So Nancy Pelosi is not only an inadequate leader, but she's responsible for holding back the Democratic Party from going farther left.
Well, let me add this. So you guys talk about Nancy Pelosi, and I think that's a whole apparatus of the Congress, of the Democrats, of the Republicans, not just one person who's at fault, but obviously the entire thing. And she is elected currently right now as the Speaker of the, so she is the most important Democrat that we have in terms of leadership, and that's the case. But going back to what Kendrick said around the question of you not watching your President Trump's State of the Union, did y'all feel like Stacey, one, what did you think about Stacey being positioned to give the response? And two, did you like her response? Was it sufficient?
So I didn't watch the response because I was busy at the time, but I did see your video that like everybody reposted. Yes. But I thought it was really interesting that they positioned her to give the response when I didn't see support. Like, you know, I didn't see Democratic institutional support of Stacey Abrams during her election.
Right.
I didn't see pushback on the completely corrupt Secretary of State, really making it difficult for votes to get through. Voter suppression was very rife. I saw a lot of like, you know, newer Democrats supporting her. I didn't see the institutional Democrats supporting her. So then for them to turn it around and then kind of prop her up as somebody who's going to appeal to the people just by it being largely symbolic and not having anything to do with actual infrastructure, actual meaning, actual power, that was really frustrating for me because that's the last thing I want to see is, you know, our black sisters being put on this pedestal of we're going to listen to you, but it's only for lip service, not for actual accountability.
Are you still glad that they made the decision to have her give the response?
Oh, of course. I think that she definitely deserves the space. I think that you can be tokenized, right? But you can also use that tokenized power to speak, you know, to speak truth to power.
Right.
You can weaponize that tokenization against the people who are in power. So I'm glad that she had the space to speak, but I was very suspicious of the sudden support of her for this particular purpose.
So I did watch, I was at home and I think I was watching something, and then I did watch the end of y'all's president, I'm gonna keep saying that, y'all's president, Donald Trump's State of the Union, and I saw him recognize certain folks in the audience, is what he typically does, and none of the people that were in the room that have issues that, you know, we care about deeply did he speak about. I'm glad he read off the teleprompter, but at some point he went off, you know, all the typical things that we expected him to do, which is why most people didn't watch it in the first place. However, I did watch I was waiting, I was ready on my couch with tea, and I was in my pajamas, and I was like, I am here to watch Stacey Abrams' response. And Trump spoke, I think, for an hour and 20-something minutes, which is like, you know, not important, but it is one of the longest State of the Union speeches we've ever had. And Stacey's speech was like maybe 20-something minutes. And she gave the most succinct, to me, she gave the most succinct response that anybody could give to the ridiculousness of the State of the Union that Trump gave. She did include issues like racism, cheating in the elections. She addressed that, you know, even though things were a wild mess in her election for governor in Georgia, that she still succeeded over, and then she created the Fair Fight campaign so that we can get elections moving forward to be more fair for people of color. She did address education, she addressed jobs, she also clapped back on the government shutdown, and she said that, and Trump didn't say none of this. She talked about health care and how we're fighting for that. So she did address a lot of those things in terms of mentioning them, right? There wasn't any policy form that came from it, but it was a response directly towards State of the Union. Let me ask you all this. For the people that are watching, do you all think it is important to vote in the upcoming midterm and presidential elections, considering how the land has now played itself out?
Yes is the short answer. Yes,
Why?
yes. Well, you know, back to Stacey Abrams. It was monumental the way that she actually won.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
the way she went about it was indicative of where the Democratic Party in elections should move in general. So another ironic thing about putting her up there is they did not support the way she campaigned. They supported another white Stacey who lost in the primaries, who was following their formula to a T and trying to get Trump voters on board and trying to reach out to, you know,
That
disenfranchised white, you know,
Esquire
working
magazine.
class, Esquire magazine covering white people, white men in particular, and the hurting white men right now that are, you know, and Stacey said, no, one, Georgia's demographic is changing, and two, there are people that are more vulnerable that need to be uplifted, that need to have the proper language in their election materials and the proper knowledge that have not ever been campaigned to. And she went for, you know, independents. She went for you know, people of color and Spanish-speaking people, and I think she had. I think the language is Tiglet, or she had, like, you know, she had materials she said she identified who was most vulnerable and went after them. She marched with the LGBT community. You know, that is where I think that this 2020 should head, and that's why I think it's important to vote there. Do I think it's you know, I think that there's a problem around the way Democrats frame voting, and like, this is your most important tool to change the country, and da-da-da-da-da-da.
You think that's wrong? It's ineffective.
I think that the voting is the caboose.
Yeah.
The voting is the last step. The voting, you know, being civically engaged, being engaged in your community first, and how to, and building people power and community and that whole thing. I mean, even, you know, if you look at, you know, Amendment 4 and, you know, the coalition building.
Wait, some folks don't know what that is. Tell people what that is. They don't know what Amendment 4 is.
Amendment 4 was a huge win after, you know, the devastating win of the devastating loss of Andrew Gillum campaign, which I think still was a win, but it was stolen. Amendment 4 passed. They couldn't invest all of their resources in all of the amazing movements that were going around, so they had to focus on the big ticket. But, you know, Andrew Gillum's campaign even wouldn't have been as successful if it wasn't for the movement that had already been built by people on the ground and community organizers, organizing around things like Amendment 4 to reinstate the voting rights that shouldn't have ever been taken away from 1.4 million people with felonies on their record.
Who were overwhelmingly black.
Who were overwhelmingly people of color, black and brown people. And so those are the movements that we need to be paying attention to around the country, and making sure they're represented in 2020, and that the candidates represent those people's interests, and protecting those most vulnerable people. Because what is this governor now that stole this election going to do to those people that now have their rights rightfully restored? You know, so that's what I'm looking for in 2020. It is important and paramount that we do vote, but leading up to is more important.
I love that.
And afterwards it's far more important.
I love that. You got context on?
I do. I have.
too. Okay, just
I can't
All right.
see.
Sorry,
Legally blind.
No. I want to hear. Are you all voting?
So I always vote. I am a voter. I think voting is important. I'm always going to be a voter, encourage voting. I agree with a lot of what Kendrick said. I was about to say, like, move on to the next question because he answered it.
But I want to hold y'all accountable. Are you voting?
I'm going to vote, and I voted every year since I've been able to vote. And for the same reasons, even if it's keeping a bad thing from happening or a bad person from getting in office, I've been there voting and encouraging other people to vote. I want to go back to Stacey Abrams really quickly because I agree they didn't support her during her candidacy, but I think the posturing of her, similar to how Barack Obama was postured in the Democratic National Convention before he ran, is very smart and very appropriate for the Democratic Party to be doing that. I'm not one to take away anything. People like Jessica Bird, who was a friend of mine who worked on that campaign,
Shout out to Jessica,
who ensured that she won, or she was the candidate on the Democratic side. These are people who worked and fashioned her values and made sure that her platform was great. But I do want to highlight a few of the linguistic things that she did during her response.
Okay.
So one thing she said was individual liberties, which is a little bit of a dog whistle to the other side, who champions individual liberties.
It was like a reverse dog whistle? Is that what you said?
It was an appeal.
Okay.
It was an appeal to a wide swath of people who think that individual liberty is the pinnacle of the world they want to see. Don't infringe on my ability to do whatever I want. Freedom to them is the ability to do whatever I want, unencumbered by other people or by the government. Right? And so that was a linguistic whistle and an appeal to bring people over from the other side. I'm not disagreeing with that tactic, but it is something to be cognizant of. When you talk about individual liberty, this is a little bit of it's an opening to a conversation which the right loves around us being unencumbered by big government. And so if you continue to use that language, it can be considered contradictory to what we really want, which is more support from our government. She also did a great job of trying to broaden the Democratic tent, and I think that is very good for a presidential candidate. Overall, it was a great speech. But I think we need to highlight the values of what we want. We don't want low-cost insurance, right? We don't want low-cost health care. We want everybody to have health care, right? And I'm not saying that's not Stacey Abrams' value. I'm saying they don't believe us, we need more people, right? We need to be able to put forth an agenda that says, I don't want low cost. I think every human being deserves the right to have adequate housing, education, shelter, everything that they need. We need to be able to provide it for them. And so we're not able to have Democratic candidates that come out and say that because we haven't built the agenda for them to respond to. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to do. It's actually not about what Stacey Abrams does, it's what we create the conditions for her to do. And that's what I think over the next few years, what we have the responsibility to do is start to create the conditions for Stacey or Beto or Bernie or I don't think Corey is going to ever be that dude. But for a potential candidate to come up and be under that wide umbrella that we created the conditions for.
Okay, so yes voting, and
on Cory Booker, I'm gonna answer your question.
Okay.
On Cory Booker on Twitter, I just saw people like did he really get out here and talk about blackface being okay? You have to put your shoes.
Because Cory Booker is in blackface.
Oh, he's making it hard to be light skinned every single day. So anyway,
he wears blackface daily.
Oh, it's a problem. So Cory, get your shit together. # Stop Light Skins 2019. It's a problem.
Bad.
Do you endorse?
I don't know nothing about that. Finish the question.
In terms of voting, I think that voting is a harm reduction. Like you were saying, it's very much something that should be the caboose. I get really frustrated when I see people talking about protesting being something that's fringe or not allowed. You know, a protest is different from a state-sanctioned rally or a march. Okay, I'm talking about boycotts. I'm talking about people getting in the streets and really making a change and going against, being part of the counterculture. Like our whole talk is about. And so I think voting should be part of that toolkit, but I don't think it should be the only thing, and I think too often it's framed as that.
Right.
So yes, I will be voting in terms of harm reduction, but this whole narrative of the lesser of two evils really has to go. America's two-party system hasn't been working. It never has been working. We can look back at Rutherford B. Hayes back in the 1800s to see how it wasn't working, seeing how he sold out black people for votes from white Southern Democrats, and how that eventually laid the foundation from switching black loyalty historically to Democrats, but still seeing Democrats sell us out over and over and over and over again.
Right.
So yeah, more on that.
Back to you, Tiffany. More on that. Back to you, Tiffany, in the field. So, nope. Back to you, Tiffany, out in
Not
Miami,
Yeah,
Florida.
not in the field.
Trigger. Okay. So I'm watching.
I will be in.
Okay, I'm watching folks on the live. Again, if you've just joined us, we are live from Miami in Baller Alert at the headquarters here. Shout out to Baller Alert for hosting this space. Check out the logos behind us. In partnership with the NAACP Youth and College Division, to which I'm the director of. Happy Founders Day to all my NAACPers watching. Also, you can join the conversation by either like typing in your question in the comments, which I'm reading all of these. Some of y'all been talking about weaves and the wall and some Kanye West president and some other stuff. So I'm filtering through that to answer questions. But you can also get engaged by using the hashtag 2020vision. You can also text the word justice to 40649. Justice to 40649. I had to do that. So what happens is happy NAACP birthday. Yay. Okay. So I'm really free 21 Savage. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. So going back to what you said, Kendrick, around Amendment 4 just passed in Florida.
Yes.
And there are 1.4 million people who are now about to get their right restored, which should have never been taken in the first place, so that they can participate in voting in elections. Back to what Blair said around the issues that Democrats are focusing on, and Republicans, and anybody in the two-party system for that matter, do not address what young people under the age of 35, millennials, which is us, care about. I want to ask you all, tell me, okay, watch this. I'm an organizer. This is a history, this is a lesson for everybody. I'm an organizer. We like to say what our priorities are, and then there are problems that we want to list as priorities. I do not want you all to tell me what problems are your priorities. I want you all to tell me what the issues are that are your priorities. And the definition of an issue in this sense is, what is the solution to a problem? So if we're talking about mass incarceration, an issue is Amendment 4. That's what we want to see because it's a solution to the problem, which is mass incarceration. Do not tell me, y'all, that you want to solve racism, which you wouldn't say anyway because you're smarter than that. But education is the issue, or immigration is the issue. That's not an issue. What is the solution that you want to see, and what is the priority of people of color, young folks? What is the issue, not the problem?
So, also history lesson. I'm writing this book on the Great Migration. And yeah, shameless plug all the time. Follow me on Instagram.
Write books, read
at
books.
Blair Amani. But the wild thing is that Black people have been, we never were given reparations. We never had a formal resettlement program. We had the Freedmen's Bureau, which was created in 1865 by President Lincoln, which was abolished by Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes was a monster. I don't know if y'all know that, but he was really bad. And I just feel like people should know. So anyway, and Black people never had a resettlement program. Meanwhile, you have different systems for other minorities. When Japanese people were interned in forced relocation camps, they were given reparations, which was a rightful thing. It should have happened. But Black people were never considered, one, domestic refugees, which we were. We were, domestic refugees from terror, through lynchings, through economic disadvantages. The New Deal program, which was also supposed to be a resettlement program for poor white Americans, never extended to Black people, or if it did, it didn't do so in an efficient way. So I think that the solution to a lot of these issues is looking at Black people whose families have moved from the South, Black people who were never able to benefit from the GI Bill, Black people who were never able to benefit from the New Deal. This is all an issue of reparations. And so I think that I remember being like a kid and being like, why is Uncle Vernon talking about reparations? That sounds so radical. And now I'm like, that's my Uncle Vernon. And now I'm like, no, reparations is what you need, because we have not had adequate opportunities to resettle ourselves. And we're looking at something that's, just a century old. There are, fashion brands that are a century old, magazines that are a century old, but Black people are constantly having to rebuild with no means. And so I think that it needs to have a direct government spending that benefits the Black community and does so unapologetically. Yeah. And I think that until we're going to continue to have politicians who are afraid of that, but until we have politicians who readily admit that this is a solution, nothing's going to change.
How'd you feel about I don't remember her name, the white woman who's running for president, who said that her top issue was going to be reparations? How'd you feel about that?
Was that...
I don't remember her name. I'll tweet it.
Well, did it happen?
Who was it?
Was that?
I'm just going through.
No, it wasn't.
William, Marianne, Elizabeth Warren.
There was a white.
I will say that I'm skeptical of white saviors who, step into this space and say that reparations are an issue. I'm more concerned with seeing a plan than seeing a dog whistle, seeing somebody say a name so that they can get a certain demographic. I want to see, actionable steps. I don't want to just people say reparations and then drop the mic.
Well done. Okay.
My number one thing would be a jobs program.
That looks like what?
It would be a massive
Like
infrastructure
civilian?
program. So Green New Deal will be a big part of that. So I will be championing energy infrastructure in urban communities and rural communities as well, actually. So across the country, a jobs program for young people primarily.
Like the
so
civilian
my
consultation
commitment,
board.
yeah. My commitment
Y'all get
will
on
be,
that. No, I'm just kidding.
my commitment will be if you want a job, you can get a job. And I think the number one cause of youth violence, no matter where you go, whether it be Chicago, whether it be Miami, is to give people something to do, right? You give young people something to do. And so it'll be a jobs program, an arts program. Not to get them dependent, but to give them the resources that they need to have the space that they need to be creative, to build infrastructure for their neighborhoods. That's speaking super
With their interests and
pragmatically.
other things, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's speaking like if you asked me today and I was running for office, that would probably be it.
Are you
The
gonna run for
grand
office?
vision would be something
Are
like
you
the
gonna run for
Freedom
office?
Papers. It's rude to interrupt. The Freedom Papers. It will be, you know, everyone deserves health care, high quality education,
wanna know.
transportation.
Poverty's on there. Hey, Amber, I see you.
Absolutely. So that's what it would be. It would be a jobs guarantee. If you want a job, you will get a job, right? It will be.
They want to
heavy
know what
tax-
papers. They don't know what papers you're talking about. Say the Freedom Papers. Say
The
it again.
Freedom Papers. You can find those online if you go to dreamdefenders.org/Freedom Papers. On there is a plan, a potential plan for everybody to get what they need. Now, what happens and why so many people move to Florida is they get a huge tax benefit to move to Florida. So if you're wealthy, you can keep your wealth by moving here. I wouldn't be for that. So if you're wealthy and watching this, you know that I am an enemy of you, right? I would be saying that you deserve to pay taxes, right? And that our state should not be giving subsidies to people that build developments, because developers are not the people that save neighborhoods. It's the people who are in the neighborhoods. It's the mom and pops. And so
Tweet
I
that.
will be taking that money and I will be providing it for the everyday people.
Tweet
And
that.
so what we believe, my fundamental belief as a candidate would be, is that we have all the resources that we need to provide for everybody. It's just going to people who already have it. And so it would be reallocating those resources. Everything that Barack Obama shied away from saying and more than shied away from doing will be a central part of what my campaign would be.
Your campaign, like when you ran?
No.
What would be your main issue, Kendrick?
Well, first of all, you got all these people running. I just want to say, if you out here campaigning for somebody already, you look crazy.
Tell them why.
No one has put out their platform yet. Stop posting videos of people talking about you, endorsing them. You don't know what they are standing for. It doesn't matter what their rhetoric is right now. The election is a far stretch from now.
And we have other elections happening before then.
There's so many
Absolutely.
elections that we have to pay attention to
Yeah.
before then. The first debate is gonna be in like 6 months.
Yep.
Calm down.
Yeah. Yep.
Stop posting people like you could put a thumbs up under their in the comments of their, but stop posting people talking about you endorsing them. You don't even know what you're endorsing
They
yet.
excited.
You look
Premature
crazy.
endorsements. It's like celebrating Christmas starting now. Like, you can't do that in
And I
advance.
apologize. I shouldn't say crazy. You look stupid.
Yeah.
You don't know what
Yeah.
they are. I'm telling you, you look stupid.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not. I'm not exaggerating.
And some candidates, you do know what they're about, right?
And
you don't know their policy agenda.
Right.
Yeah, their policy agenda is not out, but yeah.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
Kendrick, let me ask you this. So that's fun fact. Walk away from this conversation knowing that you cannot be endorsing people prematurely until they actually have debates and present their policy platforms, like Kendrick said. Shout out to Kendrick. Let me ask you this. So then when people do start putting that stuff out and we do start having the debates, what's your criteria for how you're going to choose your president that you're going to support?
So it's going to be the same. Well, it's similar to what my most important issue would be,
Which is
criminal justice reform.
Mm-hmm.
Abolition. I want to see people abolition. I want to see people be. I want to see candidates be more bold in their rhetoric and their policy. Not in whatever their points are. Stop. You know, this should be this election shouldn't look like any other election before.
Mm-hmm.
Stop wording things that give you an out later to say, well, I didn't actually say so and so. You need to word these things. Look at these policies that, you know, Dream Defenders and BYP 100 and the have
Straight
put
up,
out
they
there.
should, yeah.
Like I have lists here. Like, listen to. You can look at the Freedom Cities. What they put out about Freedom Cities. The agenda to keep us safe. BYP 100.
Yep.
Safety beyond policing.
Yep.
Catal Center.
Yep.
Either what?
The Catal Center, which is working on less is more to reduce the likelihood of people being reincarcerated.
There's all kind. When you read through these, you will see what it looks like to word things in a way where you can be held accountable.
Yep.
If you're not wording things in a way where you can be held accountable, it's not a real promise.
Yeah.
It's not a real.
Y'all
It's
know what
not
y'all be
saying
doing.
what you actually are standing for. And I want to see a reframing of, and this, I have to, shout out all the people that have advised me on this, like Tia Oso and Patrice Cullors and Mike De La Rocha and
the all-star
We have
team.
all the same friends and we don't know each other until today. I just want to say that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But Melina Abdullah, these are people that are doing the real work.
Yep.
And even out in New York, Linda Sarsour and Carmen Perez, and so I'm looking at the way that they're carrying out their campaigns.
Yep.
And looking at a different framing of public safety, and because we equate that with policing. And the thing is, everybody's on board with abolishing private prisons now, and we have moved so far from the rhetoric of like putting cameras on cops and all of that mess 2 years ago, and progress has moved further in the past 2 years in culture than it has in the past like 2 decades. And politics needs to catch up. It's so far behind, and people are looking at being progressive, saying things that they should have said in 2016 today. We're so far ahead of that. We shouldn't be looking at it. We know that police do not make cities safer. We know that police do not make our communities safer. When you see a bunch of police on the street, you are like, oh, I'm in a bad area. And it's not because of crime, it's because of the police. And there are so many studies on this, and we know that education helps, we know that jobs help, we know that health helps. So we need to look at public safety as investing, as we said, in reparations and all this stuff. The same thing that's happening in Puerto Rico is happening, they were talking about in Florida. All these taxes that people are getting from marijuana, from developing and all that stuff need to go to the people. We need to be reinvested in the people in the communities that have been most hurt by problematic policing, by the war on drugs. And they need to be invested in education, jobs, and the actual people, and health. Health should be, everybody should have access to health care. So those are what I'm looking at. And that is criminal justice reform. All of that is intersections of criminal justice reform.
Thank you for setting that agenda for us. I love that. I don't need to snack because I got one on my taped to my neck. Okay, so we heard reparations, we heard jobs, and we heard criminal justice. I agree with all of that. I'm going to add mine and answer my own question. Education is the biggest one for me. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, my entire career has been focused on education reform and like supporting specifically people of color and young folks to be able to have access and retention in college, however you decide to choose to define college, whether it's community college, a different route, vocational college, four-year university. Shout out to all my HBCUs. I didn't go to one, but shout out to my HBCU. I see
the number one, the only.
Don't do that up in here because we got Howard University in the room. We got Bennett College.
How many people from FAMU do we have in the room?
Woo!
I dropped out of Howard Law School. That counts. That counts.
I went to historically white university. Shout out to all my people from UC Santa Cruz.
The slugs. What is it?
Banana slug.
Go banana slug.
Woo! Go banana slug. Send me a slug. Okay. I thought we saw a banana slug at the beach today.
They voted on this.
We voted. The young people voted on the mascot.
Banana slug.
Banana slugs have no enemy. Nobody wants to eat a banana slug or kill a banana slug, and that makes us invincible. Let me finish what I'm saying.
The right wing talks about voter disenfranchisement. This is one of the reasons they go for voter disenfranchisement.
That's not why. It's because we're black. That's why. Okay, so what happens is when we talk about education and reform and retention for young people, for communities of color, it's really important that we don't just keep the system as it exists today. But we also have to talk about the cost of college. I'm all for free college, period, across the board. Shout out to UTLA, who just won their contract. The union workers just won their contract in Los Angeles. All the teachers demanded action as a unit, as a community, as a movement, and they got what they wanted and they won. And now they're fighting for young people and parents and future students who are going to be the kids there, and fighting for better wages for teachers. And so we need to continue that movement and that fight. And I want all of our candidates, whoever they are, national, local, statewide, to fight for all of those things that we want in education, and to make sure that our people get the education that they deserve. That also includes what you talked about earlier. People don't get civic engagement training or education when they're in school. I didn't learn half of this stuff I'm talking about now in school.
I didn't learn how to write a check in school. I know how to open a bank account in school. Like practical job
How do you
skills.
vote?
Exactly.
How does the Electoral College work? Who is John Lewis? You know I didn't know who John Lewis was until I got to DC. I know. Listen, I went to a public school. Okay, so shout out to public schools.
I know.
Shout out to public schools. I love you. You're the reason why I'm here. So thank you. So education is my biggest issue, and so we want to hear from you all. Make sure you write in the comments. Tell us what are the things that you're looking for in all the elections that are coming up, both this year on the midterm level and on the national level with presidency. What are the biggest issues to you? Free my people. Public school is great. Shout out to all the public school people.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah, come on.
Okay, so I saw one of the commenters say that they have TOPS, and I think they're referring to the Louisiana program TOPS.
Okay.
And so Louisiana is one of the more conservative states, you know, if you're aware. I went to, not most, because there's Mississippi, but I went to Louisiana State University, and if you, I think, attained a 2.0 or a 3.0 or higher, you got free college if you were a resident of the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, we have a similar thing here.
And so there's a similar thing in Florida. This is something that exists already. So when people talk about free college, people get all freaked out because they start thinking about socialism, and they're like, oh, that's scary. But it's very effective, and it's happening in countries all over the world. And it helps, you know, like the bottom line, it helps the economy, it helps people, it helps lower the crime rate because people are able to get jobs. But yeah, oh hey LSU.
Hey LSU, we see you.
Ooh, they have some work to do.
Well, why are you talking about Alicia Keys hosting the Grammys? Shout out to Cardi B who won. Okay, keep
Yes.
And
Okay,
then
no, that's not.
Grammys.
And what?
You misspelled Grammys.
Oh, you misspelled Grammys.
Maybe you should go. No.
Criminal justice reform is on there as well. Maybe you should go to TOPS. And everybody's enjoying the podcast so far. I did see some outrageous comments, but I'm skipping over y'all so y'all can ignore that. The biggest issue to me is tackling the structure of public schools. Yes. And really paying more attention to and providing programming for our youth and mental health.
Octavia Yearwood.
Shout out to Octavia Yearwood. Black History for Slavery. Shout out to everybody. Black History Month. We love you. Happy Black History Month.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
And speaking of mental health, I just wanted to give a shout out to Reform. I wanted to give a shout out to Reform LA Jails in
Patrice.
LA. Patrice Colors initiative. It's going to be on the 2020 ballot. Did a lot of work to get it there. But there was a vote today on ending the $4 billion mental health jail that they want to build in LA. I still have not got any updates on that, but the 2020 ballot Reform LA Jails initiative will give subpoena power to the Sheriff's Civilian Oversight Committee and actually give them power to subpoena documents and hold the Sheriff's Department accountable, and also force them to take this $3.5 billion that they're trying to build new prisons and jails in the largest county jail system in the world, the LA County jail system. They're trying to build $3.5 billion worth of new jails to expand that even more. We want to take all of that money and put it towards alternatives to incarceration for mentally ill and homeless. Now, we need to vote yes on Reform LA Jails, but that's going to take a lot of, grassroots organizing and getting behind. We're talking about what's going to happen before. This is a good example of what we need to be doing up to 2020, which is organizing people around this, because there's going to be a lot of people, I won't even say a lot of people, there is going to be a lot of money invested in ending this initiative because sheriffs don't want to be held accountable. Sheriff's departments don't want to be held accountable. Private prisons want to profit off of it. There's just so many enemies to this that are much better funded than us, and the only thing that can counter that much money is people power. So we have to get out there in the streets and make noise about that. Reform LA jails.
And listen, you talked about Kendrick. You can hold it actually because I have my phone. You talked about money in politics and like corporations and individual people who are greedy, who want to just continue to make a business and a profit off of people being incarcerated. One of the things that we know we have as a movement, as a people, and when I say movement, I mean the intersectionalities of all of the movements and all of the people and all of the young folks and all the people of color and all the allies that we have that do this work. So that's what I mean by movement, because movement is not singular, it's multiple movements that are taking place right now. That we have young people, we have people, and we have time. And with those things, we don't always have money. When we do have money, we move, but sometimes we don't. And so we have people and we have time. And when we organize folks, we have to be able to make sure that folks are understanding what it is that they're actually casting their ballot for when they make educated decisions, and not just following the trend. You made a good point earlier. Why are y'all just sitting here endorsing people who just saying their name and I'm running for president without knowing what the platform is? So let me ask you all this, because I've been seeing a few folks, census 2020. Oh, I'm gonna get to that in 2 seconds. Yep, census, I see you. 2 comments about the census. Give me 2 seconds. There are some people in this live who have said, how do you get this information? I don't know how you guys know all this stuff. We don't know what you're talking about. Tell me how you get information and stay educated off of the things and the issues that you care so deeply about. Where do you get your information from? And who are some trusted figures that y'all know? You can shout them out, it's okay. Kendrick Sampson.
I'm gonna say Kendrick Sampson, one of them. I'm gonna just say it sounds like old people shit, but I read.
What do you say?
I read books, words.
Hey.
I read. Anybody who's watching this, I buy them on Amazon, which is not the best place to go.
Shout out to Amazon.
You asked me.
I bought Amazon today too.
They run. I read, and so let me give you all a few of the things that I've been reading that I think are important to understanding where we are today. One of them is The Trouble with Reality, which is a very short read that you can pick up and read it in about 2 hours. That talks about the
MZ_J said reading is fundamental.
Yep. Y'all remember the pizza parties we used to get? Did y'all have reading is fundamental at your school? Pizza parties.
Oh, I did the Scholastics book.
Yeah. The Trouble with Reality. I read. The other thing that you can read every single day is Jacobin. JACOBIN. I'm sorry. JACOBIN mag.org. JacobinMag.org. If you go on there, they give you another perspective of current events that are going on. I also read CNN, but with the grain of salt. I know what they're trying to do. I know what they represent. I also have recently begun reading Fox News and Breitbart.
I'm about to ask you, because you said you got to watch the State of the Union from Trump. Do you watch the other alternative?
I read Breitbart, which does not have the strongest reporting, but I read it, and I also read Fox News now to get their perspective of things. I think y'all should just consume as much information as you can. You know, they say that free thinking is something that only certain people are allowed to do. It's something that's available to all of us. You gotta read. Just read, motherfucker. Just read some shit and put it and compare and contrast what you're reading from different outlets. But Jacobin Mag has been an important, crucial thing that I've been reading recently that's given me the information.
See that question?
No, I do not listen to Umar Johnson. I don't listen to him because he gives you a watered down FOTEP ideology. It's not something that I'm a big fan of. We could talk about that later. That'll derail the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm not trying to talk about that.
Also, he's like highly homophobic, and if you're not here for all black people, then you're not here for any black people.
He's just European blackface shit.
Exactly. No, so every day Brittany Packnett does a reading list every morning. I don't know how she does it, but she's very organized.
Talented.
I wish that I was that organized. I'm not. Maybe one day, #goals. But she does a morning reading that really gets you up to date on the issues of the day. I also look at Twitter. Twitter can be hella depressing, but you can also look at things that are more accessible in language. I remember seeing Chris Hayes posted about the shutdown happened. He used language that I had to look up, and like I write history books, so like there's a certain level of assumed literacy that you should be able to have, but there's still so many barriers to being able to understand basic shit because people want to make it sound more complicated because they are intentionally trying to keep you out of the conversation. As far as looking at different sources and trying to remain neutral or filter out the fake, critical thinking is super important, but you also have to look at multiple sources and also wonder why, if somebody's giving you a message, what is that agenda? What purpose does it serve? If somebody's saying that, for example, if we're saying that Dr. Umar Johnson is, not somebody who's listening to us, what is that incentive? We have zero incentive to say that. We just feel it's the truth. However, if it was a different system saying that somebody else was lying, that might have different implications. So always think about the political powers, always think about the influences of where your information is coming from, and look at multiple sources. Something that's super important to me that my dad taught me, and I was like, Dad, you're whack, but he was actually really on point.
Shout out to Dad.
Definitely shout out to Dad. Was looking at direct sources. So if he's looking at media from other countries, he's always looking at people on the ground. Never anything translated, never anything filtered through, never anything watered down, because he wants to hear from the people. And I think that's what makes social media so important, is that you can get those direct responses instead of getting it through a media apparatus that is going to put their own politics into the mix.
Question: how do you filter out the fake news? Kendrick,
I just answered that.
you did. Kendrick, how do you filter out the fake news?
That's a long.
Yeah.
Listen, we have to create a culture around being engaged with your neighbors, being engaged with your community.
Yeah.
That's largely how you filter out the fake news. Once you start creating that culture and holding each other accountable and protecting each other, especially the most vulnerable among you, and that search alone, that process alone makes you have to understand those who are not like you in your community. That makes you understand, those who are trans, and you look up who are the most vulnerable among you and how to protect them in different ways that you agree or disagree with. When you start you say black women are the most vulnerable among you. How do you protect them? What does that include? What types? Are you looking at just cisgender black women? Are you looking at? You start digging into those things. You have to read. You have to look at Twitter, and you have to start creating a culture around protecting and liberating. And that's kind of how that is how you filter out. Once you start, really honing in on what you believe and doing the work, because a lot of people tap out as soon as I send them a reading list. Send them a reading list and they're like, thank you so much, I'm gonna get to this, I promise.
Yeah.
7 months later, I see them on the street or something and they're like, oh, you know what, can you send me that reading list again? Or whatever, or like, hey, did you read any of that stuff?
The real one.
Oh, that's, I started reading that,
Yeah.
and that's, a lot of people, what it boils down to is a lot of people don't want to do the work. And I understand that we don't have time, and that as oppressed communities, we have to do our work and make money and pay our bills. Unfortunately, we also have the burden of educating ourselves on things that the schools are not going to educate us on, and that they strategically try to hide from us. But in order to build power and coalition build intersectionally with all of our communities that are oppressed, because our liberation is linked together, we have to create a culture around educating ourselves and upholding, those values that we hold highest, that we should hold highest, in my opinion. So anyway, that's how you filter out. Then you can start identifying when you see a headline that is problematic. You can start identifying when you read through something's going to catch your eye, or you can send it to your trusted advisor or buddy or whatever and say, does this sound right to you? And they'll catch something else, and then you can hold these outlets accountable, and then you can say that I love this particular site or whatever, but that particular article or that editor, you start learning editors, and you start, so yep. It is a culture around accountability for your own, liberation work, and we all need to be involved in that.
Okay, so I have to do this now that you've talked about holding each other accountable and liberation work. I don't care who answers it.
Somebody said, what is cisgender? I'm really sorry.
Oh,
what is cisgender?
That was important.
What is
Just popped up
cisgender?
right there.
So cisgender, as we are defined by different, let me get my book. I have a definition in my book, but anyway, which is called Modern History, which you can get on Amazon. But anyway, cisgender is when the gender that you are assigned at birth aligns with the gender that you identify with presently. So if you're transgender, it might shift, it might change. We all perform gender on a daily basis, and it's also important to remember the idea of a gender binary is something that was instituted by colonial forces. It's not something new, or it is something rather new. It's not something that has existed throughout human history. So definitely give yourself some Googles, check that out. Also go to GLAAD, they have great resources on different terminology about the LGBTQ community.
Can you also just, women are like what femmes would be, and like the different identities that.
Oh, sure. So, for example, I'm a cisgender woman. That means that I was, identified as a woman when I was born, and I identify as a woman today. For example, you also have femmes, that's somebody who identifies as more feminine spirited, but may not identify outright as a woman. You also have non-binary people who neither identify as male or woman, or masculine or feminine. This goes back to looking at pre-colonial Africa, where gender was not a form of social organization. It was more age-based than it was gender-based, but then colonial forces came in and created this idea of a binary to create all of human existence around procreation, which we also know to be garbage. So, yeah, more on my page on that.
Somebody asked, is this a black-only space on our feed that we just had? And the answer is no, this is not a black-only space. However,
if you're asking if I'm black, I'm black. You can look at my page. I saw another person asking.
Wait, why would they have to go to your page and you're sitting here?
They can't.
So they can't.
I saw somebody also ask about my melanin. I've been waiting for my melanin to come in for 25 years.
She was like, go to my page. She's sitting here. You can look at her here. Anyway, so what happens is this. No, it's not a black-only space. However, this space is two things for folks who just signed in. One, it's focused on millennials. Everybody here is under the age of 35 and over the age of 18. Don't worry about how old we are. I'm turning 30 in April. Team Aries. And this space is also between the ages of 18 and 35, and it's people of color. And we were able to gather and talk about who are, and specifically me and Philip actually been working on this for
12 days.
ever since the first State of the Union last Tuesday. We was like, wait a minute.
Right, yeah.
This
7
cannot
days.
be the State of the Union that America listens to in 2019. There are so many other issues. So I called my brother and he DM'd me, and then I texted him back, and then we tweeted 2 times, and then we went through a Google document, and here we are.
And we got like shit in paper now. This is real. This
What?
is a real thing now.
And we have to, we were able to come together with millennials and people of color. So it's not a black-only space. We talked about a bunch of different issues, and there are intersectionality between each of us that we've also addressed and had in this conversation that you probably haven't seen because you're just signing on. So going back to the piece around holding people accountable, thank you for the reminder. I want to ask you all, Gucci.
Oh, sorry.
That's the question.
Gucci!
Because 2 people have asked the
Gucci.
question around Gucci on the feed.
Yeah.
So I saw somebody wearing Gucci out here in Miami, the little Soulja Boy headband with that said Gucci. And I'm gonna be like, sis, what are you doing? And I think that we all exist in capitalism, right? This isn't a cop-out, it's just a stating of the facts, And I get really...
Don't assume people know what capitalism is because they don't know.
You explain capitalism.
Capitalism is what we currently live in. It is the belief, it is an economic system that believes fundamentally that a few people deserve the resources and the profits from the labor of many people, and that workers do not deserve a decision in what happens with their labor.
So that's the system that we all exist in. So
Who are they talking about?
capitalism is a system that we all exist in, right?
What's your name, Mom?
And for example, when you see things like Nike, supporting Kaepernick, it's great because so many people get excited about it, but at the same time, Nike is notorious for not paying workers properly and not and using prison labor. So you have this phenomenon of black people who have been incarcerated for stealing shoes, ending up being the people who make the shoes that go onto the mass market. So it's really frustrating for me when I see people saying, oh, this company supports, this company doesn't support. As it concerns Gucci, the majority of black Americans, we're not buying Gucci. We're not, spending money on luxury items like this. But when we look at Gucci, it's important to think about how impact and intent impacts the market, right? So you saw Montclair, what was that in a couple of years ago, 2016, that had a bunch of different, like monkeys on it. As if we look historically, we know that monkeys have been a slur that's been used against black people, even used today. And so when you see, oh yeah, and
Sorry,
then people,
yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, 10 seconds. Go ahead. 10 seconds.
Oh.
You gotta finish.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that when you see a company like Gucci then doing something like this, you see H&M putting a shirt that says coolest monkey in the jungle and then having zero analysis of what that means to a community, it just shows me that this company doesn't care about our communities and that we shouldn't support them financially, yet we still see it happen. And is that because we live in a capitalist system or because people don't give a crap about our community? It's hard to say.
Okay. Commercial that we don't have because nobody sponsored this event. We did it on our own because we're amazing. Thank you to Baller Alert. If you want to get involved, you can hashtag 2020 Vision. You can also comment in the section of the live And you can also text the word justice to the number 40649. Again, text the word justice to 40649. We got 41 seconds left until it cuts off. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna cut it off, and then we're gonna come back on the live. We're not going anywhere. Y'all join us, tell your friends to join us and get involved. Again, 30 seconds, but we have to cut off right now, and then y'all come back. We'll be here.
Tiffany, there's no commercials on live.
Oh, wait, no.
That's a commercial. 11,728 viewers.
That's great.
Hold on, let me write it down.
Data.
What did I just say?
Data.
11,700.
Deliverables.
Thank you. I need that.
Wow.
Okay, great.
Oh,
Great.
that was so
Great.
great. Did you see
Yeah,
the one
great.
kid who was like, I thought there was a female.
Kendrick, we got the air on for you. You feeling better?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was like,
No, is it still hot up
What?
there?
One of the kids was like,
No, I'm better.
I thought it was
Okay.
just male and female. I learned something new. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, that's dope.
I can't be looking at this bullshit because it was some fool. Oh my god, it was some stupid shit
But
over
it's
here.
black.
Tell me when we're going live again. Y'all ready?
Oh my god.
There's her melody.
We gotta go, bro.
I was like,
Jazz.
I saw David on this. I was like, oh.
No, Justin said who got my phone. Jesus.
It was one.
Oh, we're back.
that
Are we back? No, we're going live. Ready?
Which one?
One second.
Here, scoot over, Kim.
said- Yeah, we gotta.
Sorry.
Are you in there? You're in there.
No drinking alcohol, Happy.
Come here, Happy. Happy, come here.
And we're live.
And we're
Come here.
live.
We're back all the way live from the international world headquarters of Baller Alert.
Thank you, Baller Alert, for hosting us. I am Tiffany D. Lofton. For those who are just joining, come back. I know you all.
There
hung
we
up.
go.
Come back. Hey, come back. Bring it back. Bring it back.
Hey.
Bring it back. Bring it back.
Hey.
Bring it back. 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 Hey, okay. Whoa, 522.
Yeah, we back on here.
Come back. We're on. It's NAACP _Youth and College Live. Okay, it's Baller Alert Live. You ready to rock and roll?
Woo.
Check it out. Okay, I'm about to rap.
We're talking about Gucci.
We were talking about Gucci, and we're talking about holding people accountable. We're talking about our own folks. We learned something new. Some folks were writing that they learned something new, that they didn't know there were more than just two genders. So we get an education in. You got book recommendations coming up.
Yeah.
You got organizations to follow. We're trying to pour out knowledge to you all so that y'all actually have this discussion with us about what we need to focus on. And in the meantime, check your facts. We want you all to have the best information, the most important information moving forward. And again, y'all are asking why are some other people not on this channel. It's because it's between the ages of 18 to 35. She's not 18.
I'm 25.
Yeah, 18 to 35. And we're having a conversation right now about millennials, people of color, being the largest electorate in the state of America right now, growing past baby boomers, and how super important it is for us and y'all to talk about our issues right now so that people who are running for office cater to what we want. If we do not tell them what we want, they'll never speak to us. Hashtag your president, Donald Trump. Okay. Even though he still doesn't care, even if we told him.
Bad example. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a bad example. Okay, so because he doesn't listen. So here's the next question. Folks might not know this. Y'all know we had a presidential election. We had midterm elections last year.
Yep.
Right now, Congress is going. I thought that was my cup just now. Congress right now is going through gerrymandering and drawing lines between different communities to determine who gets money where. So if you mad because your pothole hasn't been fixed, or you mad because your school is underfunded, shout out to Bennett College who's been reinstated. We see you, we love you, and we want to make sure that your grocery store has healthy food in it and that people have good jobs and wages. Congress decides who gets money where. But the only way they're able to decide who gets what money is not because of how big the area is that they draw the lines around. I'm trying to break this down for you. The way that they determine who gets money in your city, in your community, is if you have a number of people in your neighborhood and you tell them that by filling out the census. People think that the census is, oh, I thought you fell asleep. Some people think that telling the census, you was reminiscing, I'm preaching right now. People think that filling out the census will give your information to the government, but I got news for you. If you got an Apple ID account, if you got a face recognition on your iPhone,
They got you.
if you can look like this on your phone and unlock your stuff,
Putting them little bunny ears on you looking crazy.
if on Snapchat, if you swipe your debit card at McDonald's, don't eat McDonald's. If you swipe your debit card at McDonald's, they already got your information. You can't hide, family. You cannot hide.
Get in there.
I have a question. So I'm on this historical kick, right? And I'm actually one of those people who's like really skeptical about the census. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Okay. Ask me the question. During World War II, Japanese people were identified because of the census. They filled out this form. They said what their ancestry was. They said where they lived, and then that was weaponized against them.
Yes.
We look at ICE, for example, people getting deported. And so I'm really cautious and concerned. Yes, abolish ICE 100%. But I want you to know, like, for people coming from my perspective, looking at a historical basis, what does this census mean, and how we protect our communities that are vulnerable? This is, you don't need the mic, girl. We didn't switch roles. I love this. Y'all can ask me questions too. So this is why it's important. Like I said earlier, the issues that you all care about, them building them, he's disappearing because he has a question about his drink. So y'all, the biggest question around mass incarceration.
This is how it goes down.
Kendrick.
There's nothing off screen here. Nothing off screen.
They can see you, Lee. They can see you. So what happens is, when you all talk about the issues that matter, like when Kendrick was talking earlier before we cut to commercial and came back, around the largest prisons being built in California, or around the issues of lack of funding for higher education and for communities, community colleges and students in school, or like jobs and like where people need to get placed to be able to have fair wages when they work. Shout out to all my union members in the live, because I'm a huge union supporter. So when we talk about those issues, here's why it's important, Blair, because when the census gets filled out, Congress members, whether you like it or not, people in Congress, elected officials, decide and determine who gets funding. But not only that, they draw these lines strategically to decide who's going to win the next election. So I can own the population in a prison, I can own the population in a school. But if I know that they're not counted in the census because they feel some sort of way about the census, then that means that they're able to still represent those people and get the most resources either way and still know that they can win an election. That's why we need to fill out the census. The census is super important. All it is a national survey to count who is where, who is who, how much you get paid, who the low income people are and where they're not. I'm gonna tell you something. I might become a, what's it called when you believe funny stuff that's not true? A conspiracy theorist. I might be a conspiracy theorist.
A Trump supporter.
No, I'm not a Trump supporter. I might be a conspiracy theorist. I think that people of color already outnumber white folks.
Absolutely.
However, the census does not say that.
Yeah.
I also blame my relatives who've been passing for white. They part from. But see, here's the thing about the census. The census is not filled out for you. You fill out the census.
Right.
So if you're a person of color, not Rachel Dozal, please check the list and let them know you're a person of color. You do that. Tell them how many people are in your household. What's your family income? Not only that, but I'm gonna be real honest. I've been doing my I'm talking a lot. My genealogy work. My genealogy work requires me, because I'm slave black, and this country has not told me who my family members are, because my family members at a point in time were not considered human beings, which means that they did not keep track of who my people were and what their names were. The only way I've been able to find out my genealogy is because people have been filling out the census. I go back and I look at the census. Who is my family? How many kids do they have? Et cetera, et cetera. So for all of these reasons and then some, please fill out this. Please fill out the census. I'm gonna do it just for you to. Please fill out and encourage people to fill it out. Please fill out the census. Here's what I would say. Last thing. Filling out the census this year, midterm elections, presidential in 2020. You know what's coming. We talked about it already. Here's what you might not know what's coming. Right now, Congress and some elected officials are working on trying to open up the United States of America Constitution to change it.
Yeah.
They want to open up the Constitution to change it, to create more policies and regulations in the Constitution that disenfranchise, marginalize, and hurt our communities in very violent ways. Ways that are institutional, because you don't open the Constitution every week to address whether or not it needs to be changed. There are only 6 more states. They only need 6 more states to vote in favor of this constitutional convention to open it up. So we're not just working on the elections for working on elections. We're working on elections because when they open up the Constitution, when we fill out the census, when we vote for our next president, whoever that may be, it's really important for us to think about the long-term game. It's a 5-year rodeo for us. And we have to be able to make it to the end. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm not in favor of keeping the Constitution the way that it is. But I know that if we don't build political power, when they do open up the Constitution, we won't get nothing that we want anyway. They can make slavery legal again. Slavery is already legal, but they can make, if you go to
They
prison,
can make it more legal.
they can make it more legal.
Yeah.
Immigration is a fight right now. They might put that in the Constitution. LGBTQIA equality might also be a thing in the Constitution. We do not want to get to that point. Please fill out the census. Please vote. End the message.
I want to add to that. Oh, yeah.
You want to piggyback?
Piggyback. I think for years, for many decades, all of us have been, whether we admit it or not, have grown comfortable with not being empowered, right? Not having governing power. And if you are watching this and you're any of our ages, you've got to be thinking about the next generation that comes after you.
Yes.
It will not be forever that we will be, as already mentioned, in the minority. And then surely will not be forever that we will be not empowered with the power to govern and actually dictate what our communities look like. So there are national implications, as Tiffany has said, already laid out eloquently. There are also local implications, right? We have cities like Jackson, Mississippi right now who are showing us what it looks like when people that look like us but also have our values and an adequate platform are able to govern a place. And so if you are not filling out the census, you're unreported, you are invisible in terms of how they draw the district lines, how they allocate money for school districts, how they really make sure that the rest of the lives that we live in the next 10 years are equitable. Now, obviously, they try to figure out different ways to get around that. But we need to start thinking about, when we're talking about 2020 vision, 2024, 2022, the next 10 years, what does it look like when we actually have the power, and what are you going to do with it? And we need to have everybody stand up and be counted that can be counted in the census.
And just quickly, historical point again, I hate that I'm turning into my dad, but it is here. If you want to look at what this vision could be, you don't have to look anywhere else but, American history. Look at Reconstruction. Just look at Reconstruction. During that time period after the Civil War, 1,500 black men were appointed or elected to different positions. You had Pierre Calise Landry, who was born a slave and eventually became the first African-American mayor of a city because black people elected him. Because black people's rights, as protected in the 15th Amendment, were able to vote for this man and were able to elect him. And it's something that's very real. It's something that we can return to, and it's something that we can rebuild. Don't think that it's impossible. It already happened, and we can make it happen even more powerful in the next years.
Another note about the census is
I feel like you about to say something bad. Go ahead.
no. Is you have to understand, research your own identity.
Yes.
A lot of people identify as white that are not white.
Miami.
And especially in Miami and like actually all over the country. And part of that is strategic. When we're talking about, it's not really a conspiracy theory. I'm not ever gonna call myself a minority again. I don't think I'm minor in any way. I don't think that black people are minor in any way. I don't think that Latinos or Latinx community or anyone else, brown people, black people, indigenous people are minor in any way. Indigenous people make up we have to have more of a global mindset. Indigenous people make up the majority of the Americas, right? The smallest population racially in the world is white people.
Yes.
There's about 600.
You just scared all of them.
Yeah, 600 million of them, something like that. 600 million as opposed to 1 billion black people. Oh, wait, hold on. 1 billion black people. Are we still on?
Yeah,
okay.
we go.
1 billion indigenous people, 2 billion, I think what's the population of China right now?
A lot.
Something, I think it's close to like
What's the population
2
of China?
billion people, 1 billion in India. Like there's the smallest population of a race in the world is, what is happening?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, who's that? Why is he still talking?
Oh, is it behind?
Oh,
It's a delay.
Okay. I was like, why does he look like me and why is he still talking?
Wait.
No, it's not gonna catch up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whatever.
It probably helps
Sorry
us
for the delay. Okay.
Either way, the biggest problem is with it is if you look at census.gov right now, look up the definition of white. One of the first things that you can that will pop up is the census.gov definition of white. And it says, you know, any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or Northern Africa.
Wow.
And during the Obama administration, it even went as far as like singling out Lebanon and what was the other country? Morocco or something like that. It was just like it's bizarre, you know. And then when you immigrate here, how they tell you to identify is white. How many people benefit from white privilege from the Middle East? How many people benefit from white privilege from Northern Africa? Even Eastern Europe, most people don't identify as white. You know, whiteness wasn't a thing. I'm not even gonna get into it.
Whiteness wasn't a thing.
It wasn't a thing until slavery, until America said.
And the Irish weren't always white.
The Irish weren't always
white. The Italians weren't always white.
There are ethnicities. You know, I mean, if we gotta go into it, there's a difference between race and ethnicity. There are many different ethnicities in Europe, even within the nationality of the UK or, you know, Britain, Scotland, Irish. There are black Irish, not black skin, but like a race of Irish are black Irish. There are, you know, Britons, Briton, that were in France. What was
Kendrick is killing it. Y'all better listen to what he's saying.
But this is like they're different ethnicities within whiteness, and a key tenet of whiteness is erasing that cultural identity. And the reason that they did that was so that white people would identify as one to make black people less than. So that because they were indentured servants, because they were slaves, they wanted to quell coalition building. That were revolutions were popping up all over the United States, what the United States was back then, and they wanted to end that. And so they made sure that they invented this idea of whiteness, gave them a right to vote or manage land, and said one day you could be like us, the elite white people here that own land and own slaves and all of that.
And you'll never be a nigger. And you'll never be a nigger.
We buried that
a part. We started over again.
Which was a part of that. You will never be them. No matter how bad things are for you, you'll never be them.
The biggest thing. Wait, are we live?
They're live.
Okay. We're coming back in. All right, here we go. Hey, welcome back.
And thank you for coming to class with Professor Kendrick. Thank you for coming to class, Professor Kendrick. You can get the syllabus online. He mentioned census.gov, and I know that you can see my iPad right here. If people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to somebody said what happened. We don't know what happened.
But a lot of y'all joined.
But you're back, and we love you.
Problem. We had a connection problem.
Yeah, connection problem. But if you Google the words census 2020,
CENSUS.
spell it for them because they spelled Grammys wrong and they spelled Philip's name wrong. And so census right here, census.gov. Google will help you spell it. If you pull that up, this image pops up. It tells you the timeline of the census, just so that you all know what's going on. Just like Kendrick said earlier, please do your research.